Well, here we are again, Dave Sweet and Mario Campa here with our special guest, Rob Dietrich, and of course, Flavian from Brandy Library. Since we can't quite do whiskey and barrel nights just yet, so we're still doing it virtual and doing different things. One thing that's always cool about tasting events, you get out there, you rediscover old favorites, and we always want you to do that, but always do something different, and it's a chance to meet the people that make the whiskey and the industry movers and shakers. So Rob Dietrich is, it's really been my pleasure to know Rob over the years. Former master distiller at Stranahan's, now is the guy running Blackened whiskey, which is all finished in brandy and cognac casks. So we're kind of taking that edge for a little bit on today's tasting. Flavian is the owner and founder of Brandy Library and now Copper and Oak as well in New York City. You can go anywhere in the world, and if you mention whiskey and New York City, people will ask you if you've ever been to Brandy Library. It doesn't matter whether I'm in Sydney, whether I'm in London, people know Brandy Library. It's been my absolute pleasure to know Flavian since it opened. We've worked together supporting the bars and our events and so forth, and an incredible first class club, and not just whiskey, but everything. A wonderful wine list, brandy list, and on down the line, great cocktails.
A New York City staple for sure.
So I can't say enough of it about it, and Flavian is an unbelievable host.
So, gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to have you both with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Very, very much my pleasure here.
Dave, what are you going to start with? Dave, as we all know, puts coffee in his sugar in the morning, not the other way around. So we're always expecting something magnificently sweet from Dave's pours. But I don't see something magnificently sweet in your hand right there.
I'm gonna start and
start with some rock and roll.
I'm gonna start with Blackened with respect for Rob, and this is an older. This is one of the first releases. It's release number 85.
Right.
Rob will explain to us how all the numbers work. I've tasted this before. Obviously, there's half a bottle missing, and Rob, are these blackberry brandy barrels?
No, it's a Spanish brandy. We don't use just one bodega. It's just, you kind of, if I'm working on that actually, because I really feel like it would be great to have just a direct connection, and I feel, I would like to be able to choose the brandy that we're using, but we are using Spanish brandy barrels for the cask finish. And, so the whiskey is a blend. It starts out, we've got an average age of 7 years in white American oak. We've got Tennessee whiskey. We've got Kentucky bourbon, Kentucky rye, Indiana rye. And of course, we've got some Canadian rye in there as well. And this was an original, collaboration between the late and very talented Dave Pickerel. So Dave had his fingers in many projects, as we know, and Maker's Mark to Whistle Pig, and he obviously loved his rye. So this was wanted to create something that was a little more rye forward, as well as getting a nice good balance with the sweetness of the bourbon. I'm a big rye fan as well. I like that spiciness, those earthy kind of tones. But what I like about the brandy barrels is it definitely the brandy will create kind of a backbone to the whole thing. So it really kind of brings the bourbon and the rye together and kind of a nice cohesiveness. Just to further another exciting kind of aspect to this, and this was something that Dave had come up with, from his time when he was a cadet at West Point. He had befriended the guy who was running the caretaker for the pipe organ there, and the guy showed him this note that when he would press the key on the organ, the room would start to vibrate and he was afraid to, hold the key down for very long for fear of bringing the whole building down on top of them. And so that stuck with Dave, and he thought that, what if we use sound to be able to work with the whiskey while it's in the barrel. And of course, Blackened is owned by Metallica, one of the largest, loudest bands in the world. And so the concept in the beginning was to create a subwoofer of sorts to play music at a very low frequency, so that the barrel would vibrate and the whiskey would move in and out of the wood at a rapid pace. And it was really pretty extraordinary to find that, the science behind it actually worked. That was, so we worked with a sound company to create a proprietary device. And, we play, you can't actually hear the music. It's just this vibrating hum. And we had a test barrel where we didn't do the sonic enhancement to, and then a barrel that we did the sonic enhancement to. And it was extraordinary, the difference that the sonic enhancement actually made. So we're using, obviously, Metallica music to kind of, change the whiskey a little bit. So it's, or at least enhance it. So every batch, you said you have batch 85 there.
Yeah.
We did start at batch 81, which is the year the band formed. And then, in the early, when they were first getting out, Dave was, still working on how long to finish it, what was the right time for finishing. Of course, they also had a deadline. They were getting the whiskey out there. So I think, in the earlier batches, it wasn't being cask finished as long as we are now. So we're now, dialing it. I think the late 80s, early 90s, the batches were, dialed in and getting, finding that sweet spot for how long to finish. Whether it's first use on the brandy barrels, or second or third use. There's just different elements to it that all lead up to the whole.
So if I was going to be critical, and I love the front flavor on brandy cask finishes, but I'm usually not overwhelmed on the finish, which is
right.
where I really put a lot of emphasis on whiskey. And if I say that this seems to have the brandy finish kind of float away, kind of gets light on the finish.
Yeah.
You guys, you're saying that you were aware of this early on. Yeah.
And that was something, I think with any blends, you're always tweaking it. You're trying to find that balance of sweet, savory, and the earthiness, and of course not over finishing, too far, but finding that sweet spot. So there's, you're always playing around with that. So yeah, they definitely, Dave, made the decision to keep it in there longer, and that's where I'm drinking a batch 102 right now, and I started with the company. I started working with the blends at batch 99, and kind of dialing and adjusting in my own ways.
Can you hold that glass up again? Because that looks a lot darker. Oh my God. Right. So yeah, look at that is really dark.
Yeah.
Compared to
by comparison, for sure.
Yeah. I think, a lot of that is, the cask finishing again has been longer. So I think that's definitely going to affect the, color, obviously in color and flavor.
Do we dare ask the difference in time, or is that proprietary?
So what I'll start doing. So I like to go from 10 weeks all the way up to 14 to 16. And I can, if I have room, I'll let it, go longer if it needs it. But I'll start sampling, at about week 12, and deciding whether we'll let it ride a little bit longer, or we're like, okay, fini. it's ready to bottle.
Now, Flavien,
so I'll let the whiskey tell me.
You've been around for long enough to where you've seen a lot of these. Have you ever seen brandy cask finished whiskeys that were like 6 months, 9 months, or does nobody ever go that long? It's too much.
No, the thing is, it's all about, as Rob said, it's all about the monitoring part of it, because if those are first use barrels, then maybe a month sometimes is just long enough, right?
Right.
Especially if it's say you take a cognac cask or an Armagnac cask, and it's a first fill, and it comes straight from the southwest of France, and it's French oak, and even more so if it's Gascon oak, right? That black oak as they call it. Then all you need is maybe just 3 weeks, and it's already a lot, both of the Armagnac and of the oak itself, that's given to the whiskey. So from what I understand, talking to master blenders, is that they like it better. I don't know if this is your take as well, Rob, but they like it better on the second and third use, just because it's just easier to not manipulate, but to control and understand, right?
Absolutely.
But this being said, it is an art to blend and to
Absolutely.
control the maturation. So unfortunately, it drinks too easily to right away think of all the work that's behind it. But kudos to you, because it's really cool.
No, sure. Thank you. Very kind.
No, I mean, it's in all honesty, and you have great people working the brand, so it helps.
So Rob, this is a little bit spicy. You're saying that spiciness from the rye has calmed down a little bit, and the one that you have is going to be a little bit of the sweetness from the brandy is going to come out.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, it is a high rye. I still get the rye right off the nose, but you can tell the fruitier elements of the brandy in there. I feel like the brandy kind of brings this little bit of a sweetness that will take that and kind of polish down the rough edges of the rye.
And which one is that?
This is batch 102.
Oh, now, Barb, we got to go shopping.
Rob, I wanted to ask you a question about something we were talking about before we went on camera. One of the things that I think is most difficult and accomplishments that I admire about whiskey makers is getting the whiskey to that point where it's really well integrated, where you don't have flavors sitting on top of one another. That all of the flavors of the whiskey do a good job of blending together. I think that's where the art form really comes in. And I admired the fact that was one of the things you brought up about paying attention to your own casks. Is there anything you want to expand on that? It was something I think our listeners will be interested in hearing about.
It really is, and as Flavian pointed out, it's about the harmony of the balance, and it really is about monitoring the barrels. You have to be tasting these things, and I'll start monitoring by nose and taste, and really identify first, as far as finishing goes, when to stop. But as far as blending, I'll pull samples from the upcoming batch, and build the blend here, and really try and identify, if there's any notes that are off. I always use a control. So you'll have, so if I'm blending batch 102, I've got a sample of batch 101 right there. I'm tasting, nosing 101, and I'm comparing it to the 102 and making sure that I'm as close as possible with the blend. And then, the exciting thing is when we apply the sonic enhancement process, which we call black noise, that is, each playlist is curated by one of the members of the band. So they take turns making that playlist. You can actually go to blackandwhiskey.com, go to batches, look up batch 101, and if it was Kirk Hammett, it'll have all the set list there, and then there's a little Spotify icon. You can take a photo of it with your phone, and it will actually populate that playlist on Spotify, so you can actually listen to the playlist of the music that was used to sonically enhance that batch. So it was really, people will buy different batches just because they want to try them side by side. And like, okay, this is Kirk Hammett's, and this is Rob Trujillo, who's the bass player. He picks a lot of bass heavy solo kind of
and drummer for sure.
Yeah, and Lars, of course, with that, he'll go for the drum solo. So people will compare them and realize, hey, there is going to be a little bit of a difference because of the way it was being moved in the barrel. So it's just a fun little innovation.
Outstanding. Kudos to Dave, who
Mario's going to be downloading. He's going to get a bottle. He's just going to be, his whole house is going to be shaking, and he'll be in heavy. He just have his bottle and just be.
Sounds like true bliss.
So Flavian, what are you drinking now? You've got Joseph Magnus.
So that
Hey.
was my first, and that's this is a brand, also using sourced whiskeys, but applying some really cool finishes in a variety of casks from our friend Nancy Fraley over in California. She's got a great nose and palate, and I do think there's great enhancement to the whiskey in those careful finishes, of course. And what's special to me about this Joseph Magnus is that it retains some humph, right? And it's not afraid of being big and bold. So there's a moment for this. And so, I mean, that's if I compare it to that Woodford Reserve brandy cask finish, it's got a lot more to say. Now, Woodford Reserve, I'm actually always looking forward to the next one because there's been some real bad ones in the past, and but they're not afraid of just trying again.
I didn't say that Chris Flavian did. So Chris Morris, if you're watching,
No, I mean, look, there's no secret. It's they have not been all winners, but they keep on innovating. That's the truth. So it's really, really interesting, and they do stuff that others don't dare doing. So why not? And I like this brandy cask finish. It's funny when you're a big guy and when you've got a big brand out there that's been out for a long time. It seems to be more difficult to come up with a limited release, a special release that's really off the beaten path. And if you miss one, then everybody is just killing the next 6 releases, right?
yeah,
So,
the bigger you are, the harder people want to pounce on you.
of course, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
look at Jim Beam. They had a Spanish brandy cask finish already a few years ago. And I know everyone in the industry, at least in the bars and restaurants that I know, really, really killed them. It was a smaller bottle, and it it was not cheap, but it was not expensive either. And I thought it was an interesting foray into something very different. But because they're the number one guy in volume, it really didn't work. It didn't sell. I mean, in spite of whatever you can hear from the Beam people, I thought it was quite interesting. But Beam, when they do finishes, always seem to go big and bold. I mean, they're Pedro Jimenez. I mean, they're the Masters Collection series, whatever they call it. That expensive decanter on that's really heavy on the sherry is very heavy on the sherry.
Right.
So it's really, really, really big. That Spanish brandy I thought was really interesting.
I think this what you're talking about. As I
Yeah.
fall off my chair.
Dave,
It's going to be the highlight of this video for me.
I mean, this will definitely be a best of, cut out. Yeah, this is
This is
the
what
one.
you're talking about, right, Flavian?
So this is their super heavy, luxurious, rich take on a sherry finish, right? And most bourbon connoisseurs will tell you it's just too much. And fast forward, and that's actually my third sample here. It's that Bardstown Bourbon Company on the Chateau de Lobad Armagnac cask finish. It's a 12-year-old that I find is so brilliant. I mean, it's gorgeous, just plain gorgeous.
No, whose whiskey is this again now?
It's the Bardstown Bourbon Company. And
Bardstown.
Yeah, Bardstown. So,
Well, Flavian, there was a time when cask finishing was a taboo subject in America.
right.
And I think it's wonderful to see that we have, as a country, have progressed away from that maybe in the last decade. Rob, would you say?
I would agree.
Guys? And I think it's adding a new dimension to what American whiskey is right now. It's exciting for me. It's very exciting.
I think there's a lot of elements of that. When the craft distilling scene started to just, it came out in about, the early 2000s was really when it started to pick up. Even with Stranahan's, they were the the 21st distilling permit issued since the end of Prohibition. So that just shows you there weren't very many distilleries that were, cropping up. But then I think with so many craft distilleries coming out that they are, their innovation has been, you're trying to be different than the big guys. So innovation has been, wholly embraced not only by the maker, but also by the consumer. Even blends, blends were not considered, they were considered with some disdain, I think early on. And that's one of the, one of our goals is to really kind of bring blends back into the mainstream as a good thing. Taking whiskeys that already exist on their own and they're already incredible whiskeys, and then making your own blend to make a unique, beautiful creation.
Sure.
It's just like cooking. You can have all these ingredients that stand on their own, but you put them together, they taste phenomenal and taste like something entirely different. So I think
I'm sorry. I was going to say something that David and I regularly discuss is, the innovative nature of the indie spirit, and literally, I mean, the inner indie spirit of the industry, and yet this craft kind of flavor that it seems the genre can't get away from. And I find it exciting that we're getting to a point where the whiskey's getting old enough and the artistry is getting strong enough that we've got this brand new crop of whiskeys that have a huge departure in flavor that's interesting for the whiskey drinker, but doesn't have that craft flavor.
Right.
And now, what are you drinking, Mario?
Oh, so I am starting today with, in honor of our guests, an homage to Flavian, the Deanston 18, which was finished in a cognac cask, has a gorgeous, gorgeous golden color. Started its life in ex-bourbon and was finished in cognac. And you can see the beautiful gold color here.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Scotch distilleries, their master blender at the time, is a friend and a very talented doctor.
I'd have a toast with you, but I think you drained the last one when you were here.
Jonathan was not
I'm
supposed
sorry.
to say that to you. Yes, I do recall Dave didn't know exactly what he had when I was there last. I was like, you're not going to like
I knew
that.
what I had. And it's really funny because Deanston has that same thing, that Deanston 18 on a bourbon barrel and one on a cognac. Now, Mario, getting back to that lighter finish. I mean, I keep harping on this, and I've got to get out and get this new Blacken now. And because Rob is saying that brandy cask follows through more. And I've got one of his bottles of Stranahan's here on a sherry cask. It'll be interesting to see how that finishes through. But do you find that Deanston 18, that cognac finishes through, or is it lighten up just a hair on the end? So lighter finish or a big finish? I
would agree that this fruit forward is more in the beginning at the front of the palate. As the whiskey trails, you're getting more of the influence of the bourbon cask. So it does trail off, at the end, but certainly does not make it through. It's more fruit forward. It's well integrated, I would say. It's not like the flavor of the cognac finish is floating on the top, which is an aspect that I don't really care for. But, it's well integrated, but it does trail, like you were saying.
So, because I'm going to jump over, and Flavian, I'd like to go back and kind of compare it to the Magnus that you have. A bourbon that I really like is the Rough Rider finish and brandy casks. Again, that god awful Dave Sweet Tooth, but they must carry, for now, from what Rob's saying, using some insight, they must float it into or keep it in the brandy cask a lot longer. It's a nice marriage on that the brandy and the bourbon. So
here's
Flavian,
the thing,
Magnus, I'm sorry, and maybe we covered it. So did the brandy carry through that cognac finish?
I mean, you definitely, you see, here's the thing. When I believe it is successful is when you do get the taste of maybe that brandy cask only when you're told, whether the label says it or the rhetoric around the label is telling you it's been aged in, right? It's you certainly don't want that taste to be really forward. It's got to be well integrated. So it's maybe the power of suggestion. But when you do drink brandy and when you know a little bit about the influence of oak and the different oak species, then you get it, and then you realize that this is taking the whole just a bit higher. When I believe it doesn't work is when it's just a weird taste profile. But what we're missing, I believe, a lot from the producers to date is to know more about the origin of this cask finishing, right? Because look, you got brandy and you've got brandy. For some reason, it looks like in America, Armagnac is becoming the go-to cask. I mean, there aren't too many barrels of Armagnac available, right? I mean, those people over in Gascony are so surprised that North America is paying so much attention to them, and they want their barrels so dearly. But it seems that there's something with the Armagnac cask that you cannot really find with the Cognac cask. And those are European oak species, but usually there are two different oak species, depending on the Armagnac producer that you're using. But you got this, and then you've got the inexpensive, for lack of harsher words, the inexpensive brandy barrels that you find in the US that were bourbon barrels before, right? Let's remember that most cheap brandies, I said the word, most
Less expensive.
approachable, less expensive brandies are aged in ex-bourbon barrels, right? I mean, and most bourbon companies have their brandy, their construction site brandy, right? That is aged in their bourbon barrel. And so you get a lot more of that bourbon using a brandy cask than anything else, right? And cognac, I think, for bourbon might just be a little too tame, too soft, too pale. If it's not the very European oak species that speaks through the cask. If it's the cognac taste that you want, then maybe you're not really getting it unless you're getting it on the first fill. But after that, what do you do with the barrel, right? So if it's a barrel that's been used for decades already, like they do over in cognac, then you're better off with an Armagnac cask, because Armagnac, or whatever is left in the pores of the wood, is a lot bigger. It's a lot bolder. Right. So that definitely helps the bourbon, because Armagnac is really just the French bourbon. I mean, in terms of intensity, right? If you're talking about non-peated Scotch, this is cognac, right? It's very similar in terms of balance and approachability, right? It's easy going. Again, when there's no peat there, when you're not talking about cask strength and all that. For bourbon, you're going bold and rich. Well, this is the very same thing in the brandy world that you get with Armagnac. So I do believe that Armagnac can go hand to hand with American whiskeys, whether they're bourbons and rye, a lot easier than cognac. I mean, so far that's a feeling. Maybe it's a gut feeling. I don't know. But whenever I tasted Armagnac cask finished bourbons and rye, I'm like, wow, it makes sense. There's something there.
Brilliant observation. What do you think about that, Rob?
Yeah, I think I did some cognac cask finishing with Stranahan's, and obviously Stranahan's is a single malt, so you're going to have different elements than you would with a bourbon. But I think that's a brilliant observation, because it really is your wood source. When you're whatever those natural elements that you're going to get from the wood, if you've got you have a spirit that's sitting in there for a longer period of time, you're going to get a lot more of that flavor. And I agree. It's pretty extraordinary how many different finishing rabbit holes you can go down. Like I created a special once a year release at Stranahan's called Snowflake. And that's where I would take the cask finishes and I would blend them together. I'd marry it might be 2 parts rum cask finish and 1 part Madeira and 1 part cognac, and that's a batch. Or it might be like, heavy on the heavy on sherry, and there were just so many ways to take all these little elements and try and delicately put them together to where they just didn't, it's not like taking a cup at a soda fountain and just hitting every single soda all the way down, and then you just got.
Sounds like you've done that a lot when you were younger.
That's what I do now. What are you talking about? I go
Rob,
mostly diet soda to make myself feel good, and then I go to the Dr. Pepper.
That's really where the art is.
Rob mentioned that on Snowflake. You got Flavian and I grinning from ear to ear. For those that don't know, people line up like the day before, right, Rob, to buy a bottle?
The last release, they started lining up days in advance. It was like 3 or 4 days, and then this last one, the first guy got in line a full week in advance. And I went out there. I know the guy. He's always the first guy in line. Because we numbered the bottles, and he wants bottle number 1 every single time, and so he's always out there first.
And you're talking about Denver in the wintertime.
Right. Yeah. This is just early December. Usually the first weekend in December, we would release the Snowflake, and it'd only be around 2,500 bottles, maybe 3,000, and we'd have about 1,000 people out there camped out in the snow. I mean, I have photos of people literally snow on top of their sleeping bags. They're laying on the ground, covered in snow and ice and frost, and it was really fun. It was very. It just kind of got it was kind of an organic growth. We never advertised Snowflake, never really needed to. Just more and more people started hearing about it and showing up. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, I'm here to say, and I'm sure Flavian can back me up on this. I mean, I've tasted it on a few occasions. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Very kind. Thank you.
Pretty incredible stuff. So now,
Dave,
Rob,
you want to move on?
what are you drinking next?
I'm drinking Angel's Envy, the rye rum cask finish.
All right.
And it's really, this would appeal to your sweet tooth, Dave. This had, I like to nose a whiskey before I taste it. I'll nose it maybe 3 or 4 times, set it down, keep nosing it before I'll actually ever taste it. And so I was sitting here nosing this thing, and it's been a while since I've had it. So it was really such a treat to, I was picking up, cinnamon, hints of cinnamon on the nose. You can definitely, the rum, the rum is very apparent. I mean, it's very rum-like. But then when I sipped it, I was really blown away. It's actually way sweeter than I thought it was going to be. I was expecting.
But I mean, let's talk about this for a second. And Angel's Envy Rye is still highly allocated. It's hard to get. We need to get that 6-pack when it's available, and then that's it, right, for the rest of the year. And
right.
But first of all, when it came out, it was a really smart move. It was really well done, and it was an incredibly different rye whiskey. Incredibly different, right? It definitely enhanced the landscape for rye, the whole rye whiskey world, right?
Sure.
But then where's the finish? Is it in the rum cask, or is it actually in the cognac cask that was there before the rum? Because it was a cognac cask first. So you're talking about ex-bourbon barrel maturation, and then a finishing in barrels that came from cognac and European oak made, used over in St. Lucia, if this is still the case, used to be the case, I don't know if it's still the case, for the rum maturation, and then serving the purpose of the finishing for that rye whiskey. So it's really, that complexity really is from 3 different worlds, right? Ex-bourbon, right. Ex-cognac, ex-rum.
Right.
So it is unique. To me, it's an explosion of ginger. It's like, it's Christmas right there for me. And it's, you want to have Christmas in August, I guess.
Or dessert in a bottle.
It's big. There's only one thing for me with the Angel's Envy Rye, is that you can do a lot of things with rye. as a producer.
Right.
And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I agree. There's definitely that ginger kind of feel to it. And I just took my second sip, and it was very very herbal. Had a very like herbal, almost like gin qualities, where there's just all these notes just kind of popping in. Really, the second sip was extraordinary, like almost a little bit different. That's sort of the ginger and that herbal kind of essence to it. Really extraordinary. This is pretty.
And it leaves a lot of sweetness lingering. I mean, we were talking about the cognac and brandy finish kind of trailing off. I know once I drink Angel's Envy Rye, I mean, that's, like I said, that's my dessert. And it just, I mean, it has this big, thick, rich, full mouthfeel. Coats the mouth, yeah.
Yeah.
It
That's
definitely
exactly.
does. Yeah, it definitely coats the mouth, and I'm picking up the elements of the wood that don't taste like white American oak, but the wood definitely tastes it's got a spiciness to it.
Oh yeah.
Not to the rye, but a spiciness to the actual wood itself.
Yeah.
Pretty extraordinary.
So I'm going to
Mario,
jump
didn't mean to cut you
over
off.
to Mario. Do you want to do your next one, or should I? You've got the Dean. You started with the Deanston.
Yeah.
What's your next one there? I'll hold off on this for the next one.
Okay. Well, number 2 for me is a fairly recent bottling from the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. This one was called Have Some Madeira, My Dear. Pretty aptly named because the influence of the Madeira on this was pretty strong. And when you learn about what it was, you can understand why. Number 112 for them is the Loch Lomond Distillery, specifically what came off of the Inchmurrin stills. The Inchmurrin stills are much taller than their standard stills, produces a very light spirit that is really easy to influence. And this is a perfect example of that. There's the Madeira influence on this is pretty strong, being that we were focusing on cognac and fortified wine finishes. I thought this would be a good one to have a second.
No, are you still drinking Scotch, or does it feel more like you're drinking Madeira wine?
I definitely would say that you're still drinking Scotch. One of the things that I admire about this bottling, while the influence of the Madeira is definitely strong, it is incredibly well integrated. Not a fan of, as I was saying to Rob earlier, having flavors that float on top of another. I think that's probably a whiskey that was either released too soon or was probably left on the drawing pad better off. But this one is very well integrated. It's just a strong finished flavor. Has a beautiful sweetness on the nose that's prominent but not overbearing at all. And on the palate, a clear, I mean, you could do this blind and you'd immediately know that you were drinking a Madeira finished whiskey. Cilantro.
Oh, wow. It's something we were talking about, that Jim Beam, and I had a little bit left as Mario was talking, and I know Mario likes a lot of times leave the whiskey out and let the alcohol evaporate off and then come back on it. In Flavian, I hear what you're saying, for this very, very high-end bottle, it almost seems like too much sherry. But after you let it sit out and really let it air, and then coming back to it, it actually is a lot more pleasant. I mean, it's been sitting for 10, 15 minutes. Just a side note, sometimes with different whiskeys.
To me, it's a bourbon that requires a nice, easy on the draw, mild cigar, so that there's a good complement.
That I could see. That I definitely can see as I go back into the blackened again. I meant to grab the Stranahan's. I'm going to jump over.
And I've had my 3 already. I mean, I keep going on.
Well, I was gonna taste the Flavian. Do you want to go over? I just poured the Stranahan's, but do you want to go back over to the Woodford? You were saying you were not impressed with it, right?
No, I mean, I like it. It's all right. It remains very fruity. I mean, this is a really, really fruity bourbon. It's just I don't really have any other information on the brandy itself. So I like to have all the information I can just so that I help my brain making sense of it all. But you know, in a blind tasting, I would like it quite a bit.
Flavian, what was your number 3? You said you've had all 3 already? I don't
Yes.
think we've heard on your number 3 yet.
My 3 is that Bardstown Bourbon Company
Oh.
on the Armagnac finish.
Yes, we sure did. My apologies.
And can that, now, is that still gettable, or was that a one-time release?
Not in New York. It looks like some of it will come to New York, but it was a small release, and it surprised everyone. It seems on how good it was. I think we're going to see a lot more of Armagnac mature, not just finished. Or let's talk about a double maturation, I guess, because there's something really interesting there. And these guys are writing a new chapter in the brandy cask finishing, because the couple of whiskey reviewers, journalists I talked to about this were just taken aback by how amazing this was. And again, you're talking about sourced whiskey. I'm not saying that anybody can access and rub. I'm pretty sure you've got to write big checks and you've got to be begging for some of the juice. But it's a juice that's already made and mature, that's already super good no matter what. You're not trying to correct something that's not great.
Right.
You're making it even greater. So that's like, I mean, you got to be an artist and a man of science at the same time. This is brilliant. You know, the fact that you still people can still come up with this in 2020, you know, after so many years of this bourbon and rye whiskey revival. This is what's exciting, because it means there's a lot more down the pipe.
Fabian, real quick, and then I'm going to jump over to the Stranahans. Boy, I'm not, you know, the Woodford is nice, and like you said, it's drinkable. A little bit more water, you get some more chocolate that comes out, but not quite as big on the brandy finish as I would have thought from Woodford. So Flavian, really fast, because you have such a handle on consumers with Brandy Library and Copper and Oak. Are consumers in general looking for something different? I mean, they're looking to explore, they're looking to get out of, you know, and again, that's what we always say with whiskey and barrel nights, why you come. You know, you can come into one evening and taste, if you wanted to, select from hundreds and taste as many whiskeys as you wanted to, and talk to the experts like yourself and Rob and
it's this
everything else.
One thing about the modern educated consumer, right? She or he wants something different, something that tells her or him a different story, right? So 16 years ago when we opened, I mean, in a couple of months, it's going to be 16 years.
Wow.
People just sat down and said, you know, let me have this. And by the way, it was, let me have Macallan 18. And let me have this. And let me have that, right? And that was it. You were a Glenlivet 12 drinker. You were a Macallan 18 drinker. And your friends were just suckers if they didn't agree. Now it's a complete different scenario. People want to drink something different every single time. Hence the liking for tasting flights and for jumping. They just want to jump from one to another. And this is why this world is oh so satisfying to the modern consumer, is that whiskey in general, whether it's Scotch or Japanese whiskey, bourbon, rye, offers this palette of experiences. And producers have to follow that trend, right? And it's tough for them, because if you make one that's not really good, then the next time those consumers will be trying something new, but from another brand.
Right.
So it's a lot harder than what it was, say 20 years ago, because, you know, I mean, look, Bill Lumsden over at Glenmorangie was trying many finishes very early on. Let's remember that between Balvenie and Glenmorangie and Glenmorangie, those were the three guys, the three distilleries that were trying ex-wine finishes. And Bill Lumsden had tried some ex-cognac casks. Actually, I still have some cognac finish Glenmorangie that I think is good, but over all of his trials, he had come up with the conclusion that grape and grain didn't mix. And ex-brandy cask in the fashion of ex-cognac cask were not really helping single malt Scotch whiskey. So that was dropped. But the whole industry over in Scotland making single malt Scotch had decided that, yeah, it was not really meant to be. So that's why they dropped it for like a good 20 years. And now they're just getting back into it. But that's because they've learned that you're dealing with different oak species. So understanding the oak species now helps them bring some sort of a new cognac finish element that's really positive. It's not just that big spicy character that you can get into the Scotch whiskey.
And a different consumer as well, Flavien.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, and a lot more choices. I mean, look at the explosion. Like Rob was saying, Stranahan's was the 21st new distillery, and now you walk down, you go to a major liquor store like Binny's here in Chicago, and you walk down they have an entire row both sides just for American whiskeys.
Right.
And then there's the back cabinet with all the special releases. Although I keep looking for Snowflake, and I'm going to have to talk to somebody there. I got to.
they're out there. I've seen them in a few liquor stores. I mean, it's generally someone who waited in line and brought it back to put it on sale. That would be one that would be worth hunting down. I mean, like I said, you treated us, and I mean, absolutely phenomenal stuff. That's one of those American white elephants, folks. Definitely hunt down. So
worth camping out a week for, I gather.
With that being said, so we're going to jump over to American single malt and do Stranahan's sherry cask finish.
And I was thinking about that. When I was mentioning that before, batch 1 and 2, I was in Scotland at the time and had my production guys batching the whiskey, and they used all first fill, which I wanted, only a handful of, very small amount of first fill, and I wanted the second and third fill, and kind of dialing that down. But they threw all the first fill at it, so it was really kind of over sherry. And I think I was dialing that back in the first, several batches of sherry.
Well, this is number 5. This is a bottle that's been on the shelf for a bit, and that advantage to Stranahan's that they've been around long enough that it's a great American single malt. You don't always have some of that noted craft taste in it. It's a mature, it tastes like a little bit more mature whiskey. Nice balance on the sherry. I do have to say, I'm just going to put a couple drops of water.
Oh yeah.
This should open it up a bit, right, Rob?
Absolutely. Yeah, just a little bit of water, a little dash water, opens up the whiskey, allows it to bloom. And it really, and I know what you're talking about as far as like, some of those more craft, it's kind of that green note, like that taste. I kind of use, like green wood, whereas, if you've had time to let, the spirit do its thing in the barrel and, let that magic happen in there, that's where you're going to really get, 50% of the flavor is going to come from the barrel.
Wow. That is some neat
Bob,
whiskey.
can you reveal what you're working on right now that will hit the shelves in a few weeks or months?
I've got a few things. There's some projects I can't talk about, but I do have some innovations coming up here. Unfortunately can't talk about it, but I'm really excited about some new expressions. I will give a pretty solid hint. Next year the band turns 40. So they will have been together for 40 years. So I have a very special collaboration that I've been working on that we are going to release next year. So really excited about that. I'm really like chomping at the bit to be able to make the announcement at some point, but I think it's probably going to be early next year before we can actually say anything. But I am incredibly excited by it. It's been really an exciting and fun experience.
Dave, I think we're going to have Rob back right around the time he's ready to make this announcement.
Well, we should all be, reviewing that and at least a couple bottles for samples, I'm thinking.
Of course, of course.
Now, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong. On the bottle, they've got the that's actually the sound wave for what was used to vibrate and mature the barrel. Correct?
It's actually that's actually the sound wave of James Hetfield, the lead singer, singing the word "blackened." So it's an actual
cool.
it's an actual sound wave. You know, they didn't want the one thing I was really impressed with working with Metallica is that they didn't want to metallicize it. You know, they didn't want to just put Metallica all over it or go to a distillery that was already producing whiskey and say, okay, we'll make a Metallica line and we'll get the royalties or et cetera. They wanted to own it outright, and they wanted it to be just as much attention as they put towards the creating music and the amount of detail that they put into that. They wanted to find someone that could do exactly the same thing with the whiskey, which is why they initially chose Dave Pickerel.
And they're all whiskey drinkers themselves.
Two of them are. One of the band members, a couple of band members are sober, but they also recognize that there was another way to connect to their fans, because they recognize that their fans, some of their fans do drink, and a couple of members of the band do drink, so they do enjoy drinking the whiskey. So it's been fun to work with them, and they're really down to earth guys, and they've been pretty really, obviously it's been pretty fun to work with them and talk about the nuances of the whiskey and continue the collaboration.
Rob, I think it's exciting that in an industry that's been producing a product for hundreds of years, you guys came up with something innovative that really impacts the maturation of the whiskey, and it's wonderful to hear that you feel you don't feel it's working. It's absolutely working.
It is. I've seen, for me, it was, I'm a whiskey nerd. So I want to know the science behind it. I want to, not only just delve into the flavor profile and the story, but I wanted to know exactly what was going on with that, with the black noise sonic enhancement. It was really incredible to see, in black and white on the lab report to actually see, that there was a considerable difference. Every single one of those markers, those 9 different flavor profiles and markers that you're looking for from the wood and from the barrel, every single one of those was elevated. And for me, that I just feel like we're just scratching the surface. If we've proven that this works in this, capacity, I want to try other things. There's other, I want to see what else we can do with this. So it's pretty extraordinary and exciting.
Intuitively, what do you think? Just off
yeah,
the cuff.
I think so. I would say intuitively, yes. I feel like it opens up a possibility of having more angel share.
So the induced motion.
Yeah.
Because the wood's going to be vibrating too. I mean, those sound waves are not just vibrating the liquid; they're going to be vibrating the wood as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, the barrels are actually physically vibrating. So it would. I think if you're enhancing, I'm always very careful not to. We're not speeding up the aging process, but we are doing a significant enhancement to the already existing whiskey that's already aged. I think I really feel that if you're, that does open up room for more evaporation. I think over time.
So if we were going to wrap up, so out of your, Rob, I would say out of the ones that your favorites are, did you have another one? You had one?
I did. I actually cracked into the Whistle Pig 12 Old World, and this one's got Madeira, the French Sauterne, and the port, and it's really. I haven't sipped on it too much. It's definitely the oak element comes through. That 12 years of resting, and I get the oak element. The finish just floats away. It just disappears, like it evaporates.
But it's big up front, right?
It's very, very big up front. It doesn't have the same kind of mouthfeel that the Angel's Envy rum did. That was definitely more mouth coating. This is more like a large entry, and then a very very fast evaporative kind of finish on it.
My favorite
very oaky.
Whistle Pig.
Say again?
Oh, okay. The 18 is pretty nice, but I don't go around drinking $400 bottles of rye all the time.
Right.
The Black Prince is the one, guys.
All right.
The Black Prince is the one.
But no, that Whistle Pig Old World, I mean, it's a huge flavor up front, though, right, Rob? I mean,
It is, yeah. It's very, and I was trying to really kind of identify. I feel like, oh, I was right. Okay, they do have the percentage of what they used, and I was thinking that I wasn't really tasting the port as much, and I looked down and they only had 7% port, whereas the Madeira is 63%, and then 30% in the Sauternes.
but you
So-
still get a lot
Elevating
of
your own palate.
support, though. I mean, they really worked hard on balancing it well, right? I mean, you still get some of the fruit that comes through. It's just not overbearing.
Right. It's very pleasant. It's not overbearing. It definitely, you get that. I'm a big Madeira cask finish. I did a lot of that with Stranahan's, and I enjoy the elements that of the flavor profile that you get from Madeira.
I agree. I learned that lesson back in the day. We were talking about Bill Lumsden and the Glenmorangie experiments, and of the ones that they released back in the very early years of the millennium, I expected to like the port and I expected to like the sherry finish, but the Madeira, it was the first time I experienced it, and it became my favorite. Absolutely knocked my socks off.
It was my second favorite behind the Burgundy cask finish.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great series, wasn't it, Flavian?
Yeah.
Sounds like we need to do this again, where we do a comparison of, and I really liked what Flavian was saying. Some cognacs are kind of like the brandy version of Highland scotches, and then the Madeiras are Armagnacs are more brandy to bourbon. Making the connections. It sounds like we need to do another tasting and do some comparisons of brandies to whiskeys. I mean, which is what, for those that don't know, before we got shut down, Flavian was working with us, and we created a brandy and cognac and Armagnac pavilion at Whiskey and Barrel Night, and the two we're seeing are just marrying up closer and closer together and being integrated more. It's not a real stretch to bring a whiskey drinker over to Armagnac or cognac or fine brandy or vice versa. It's just a matter of finding the right one, just like wine. So
Armagnac is definitely a natural extension to the American whiskey line, for sure.
oh, we just lost Mario. I wonder if he lost power on his
You
computer.
think he just went away to get himself some White Claw or something?
Yeah, well, yeah. So just to wrap up, Rob, thank you very much. And you're saying that we should watch for some new releases from Blackened over the next few months, 6 months or so.
Did you say it would be a 40-year-old?
What's that again?
Did you say it would be a 40-year-old?
No. Good try though. No, it's I'm really excited about it. I'm very I'm really excited. I can't wait until I can actually talk about it, because it'll be I think there's gonna be a lot of excitement when we do.
I still think that Spirits Network should be telling the story. Maybe we need to connect and make the show. It would be.
I agree.
So to do our so again, we've got Flavian, who wears multiple hats with Brandy Library and Copper and Oak, and then also one of the people behind Spirits Network, as he was just saying. There's Mario again. So put your video on there, Mario. There you go. Wait,
how was that can of White Claw you just had?
Yeah, we said you had to jump out and go get some White Claw.
My electricity just went out, gentlemen, and
Oh,
the
wow.
connection dropped, and I apologize. I had to wait
Yeah,
for
when
my
I need to
modem
go get my
reboot.
White Claw shot, then that's what I'm going to use too, is that my electricity went out.
Yeah, and the
Talk about inconvenient timing. Guys, I'm so sorry.
So but so anyways, we were saying, so Flavia, Brandy Library, and Copper and Oak, and then Spirits Network. And then Rob, formerly at Stranahan's, man behind the whiskey for years, now the guy that is doing all the cool stuff with Blackened, and we're going to be watching for some special releases, some anniversary releases. Flavian tried to goad him into that 40-year release, but Rob wasn't having any of it.
Rob, may I ask one more question before we let you go, please?
No.
You've had the experience now of aging in two prominent mountain states that are polar opposite sides of the country and extremely different extremely different climates. Can you please talk a little bit about your experience with these two very different climates?
Well, first and foremost, the whiskeys that we are using for the blend are aging in their respective states. So when they're aging up to 7 years, it's Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana. So it's those climates that have already affected the whiskey before we've even gotten it for the blend. And really, at that point, we're cask finishing it. Once we receive the whiskey, so it is in Colorado we were dealing with a very dry climate, high altitude climate. So there was a lot of angel share, which we would combat with a heated and humidified room, so 70 degrees and 45% humidity in our barrel houses and at the Stranahan's, where how we would combat that angel share and hang on to more of the whiskey, because we're the ones paying taxes, the angels aren't. So we want more of that whiskey to continue. With Vermont, it's very humid. There's a lot of humidity there in the summer, so that already takes care of that, and they are pretty warm. So it kind of so there's not any climate control on those barrel houses other than just ventilation. So it's been nice. You're not actually spending more money on specialized equipment when you're actually in an environment that is conducive. You look at rum coming from Barbados or Trinidad, and it gets darker much faster in the barrel because it's a great climate for that aging.
Just like
they're probably losing a lot of angel share though.
Just like some of the craft whiskeys down in New Mexico and Texas and everything else, it's hot and dry all year round. They're aging incredibly fast. Right.
And that's the thing, with that climate control, we really were getting, our 2-year whiskey at Stranahan's really had more of a 2.5 to 3 year flavor profile, just because of, it is, getting more interaction with that wood.
And now you're using rock and roll to get more interaction with the wood.
Yep, now we're using rock and roll.
How are we doing, Dave?
It's about time for us to wrap up, and then we'll leave a little bit something extra. I look forward if Rob, if you get on the show with Flavian on Spirits Network, I definitely will tune in. Every time we talk, whether it was on that panel in Florida or at the distillery, I always learn something. And very important question: do you still have the motorcycle?
I do still have the motorcycle. It's parked out in front of the house right now.
What year is that thing?
Well, it looks like it's from 1939, but right. it's actually 2010. It's a Russian Ural that has a sidecar, and it's painted up to basically the Russians had reverse engineered BMW's motorcycle just before World War II and made the Ural. And so it has the opposing head cylinders, and I can actually engage the sidecar wheel to the back wheel. I can move a little lever and turn it into a 2-wheel drive. So I've got heated grips on that and a heated suit. I ride it year round in the winter. When I see a big snow out on the ground, I get really excited and bundle up and throw that second wheel in, and I'm out there in the snow with on the motorcycle just rolling. It's a fun. It's impossible not to have a smile on your face if you're sitting in the sidecar.
And folks, That's what
originally
it
got it
takes
for my
to make
dog.
whiskey.
Yeah. It was, I saw that and I'm like, please tell me that's yours. Please. Oh, we need to go for a spin on that puppy.
Yeah.
I mean, you should have seen the big grin on Davin DeKirkomo's face. He's like, Dave, this is great. We can go home now. We had a cool trip. Never mind. We saw Stranahan's. We went on a motorcycle. That's it. We're done. We can go.
Yeah, it was fun. Right? We did a little spin around the neighborhood. We actually had Jess Graber, who is the founder of Stranahan's, and of course, legendary distiller himself. He's the guy who is my mentor. I threw him in the sidecar, one time, and he's 6'4". He used to be a linebacker in college. It's a little bit different when you have larger person in the sidecar.
Oh yeah. Now, did you ever meet him? What is the name of his? To digress for a moment, that crazy nothing bar that he hangs out with.
Woody Creek Tavern.
Yeah. We went.
Hunter S. Thompson used to hang out there.
What a cool guy. Oh, Mario's going to cap us off with Bowmore. All right. So,
I didn't want to interrupt.
Finished in who?
No, that's
Mario. It's finished in what?
This is part of the Vintners trilogy, and this 18 was finished in Manzanilla cask. It's definitely one of my favorite modern Bowmores, not released as a distillery only. This is a magnificent, flavorful whiskey. I think it's incredibly well balanced. The nose brings the smoke from the cask and a very sweet peat. On the nose, the manzanilla and the peat play incredibly well together. And then the palate follows very much of what you're expecting, has the sweetness of the manzanilla, but it's just so beautifully integrated throughout. And that definitely follows all the way to the back palate. Not a particularly easy bottle to get right now, but it is still gettable and something I'd recommend if you like the style of fortified wine finishes. This one was brilliant.
And Flavian, you said you're familiar with that bottle too, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's one of
so
my
whatever they lost in a little bit of that sherry PX cask on the beam, they made up for it on the Bowmore.
I guess that's a good way to put it.
So
you put everything together.
What were you saying, Flavian? You were just about to say it's one of your favorite?
Definitely one of my favorites. And it's just that combination of the mild peat and the salinity of that manzanilla. There's something that's just like pure balance there, and it's explosive, but civilized. It's elegant.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Absolutely.
Every time we do one of these videos, my whiskey bill goes up, and I have to negotiate with Barb. It's just I got to stop these. I'm running out of things to negotiate with. She's gonna start going after other things.
Gonna start?
It says that I have enough whiskey. I have no idea what she's talking about whatsoever. I don't think you ever can have enough. But the reason why you go to Whiskey and Barrel Night, the reason why you go to events is to be able to talk to just the experts, the walking encyclopedias like Rob. The guy's forgotten more about whiskey than most of us will ever know. Flavian, do not underestimate. Every time Flavian and I have a chance to talk, I am forever impressed. Not just, Barb will drink whiskey now, but we've gone into Brandy Library and she'll want a particular type of wine. And he has never, ever failed to impress, whether it's wine or it's brandy. A phenomenal range of mezcals and tequilas. And, of course, one of the most impressive whiskey lists I'd say in the mid-Atlantic area.
Certainly a king in New York City, without question.
I just want the fall to come up upon us very, very quickly, and everybody to just beg to go back inside safely, of course. We need the vaccine and all that, because I need this business to be flourishing again.
Yes.
So, well, from your mouth to God's ears, gentlemen.
Oh, we understand.
I've got way too many fond memories at Brandy to have to not be able to do many, many more. But
and hopefully we'll have one together.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. And just
Definitely.
like that, David and I are very much looking forward to putting on our next whiskey and barrel night. We can't wait.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And definitely hang with the experts, learn, talk less, listen more, and that's why these guys are there. And taste something different, taste something cool. Always go outside that comfort zone, do different things. So with
Absolutely.
that, gentlemen,
Agreed.
cheers.
Cheers.
Gentlemen, it's
Gents.
been such a
It's such a
great
pleasure.
pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining
Very
us
much.
so much.
Thank you.